Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the most popular werewolf movies of the 80s, often pitted against An American Werewolf in London. Brought to you by the same man who gave us vicious, hungry, bloodthirsty little gremlins. This review was requested by Mark's Monsters and Simonson59. The movie opens with the title Tearing Through the Screen. Really sets the mood. We're shown a broadcast of Dr. George Wagner, played by the late Patrick McNee, as Karen White, played by Dee Wallace, is on her way to meet with a serial killer who'd been stalking her. The idea here is that she will lure him out so the police can catch him. The problem is that the transmitter she's wearing isn't working properly, meaning that she's headed into the killer's den without a way to get help. Also, the killer's lair of choice happens to be a porn shop. Go figure. Here, Karen finally meets Eddie, played by Robert Picardo, in the flesh. And when she gets a good look at him, it sufficiently scars her for life. Thankfully, the police arrive in time to shoot Eddie full of holes.
I knew I shouldn't have left that broad back here.
Something tells me this isn't the first time this has happened in this place. Good news is, the serial killer Eddie is dead. The bad news is, Karen now needs intensive therapy. After the traumatic event, she doesn't really remember what happened, which prompts some deep concern from her husband, Bill, played by Christopher Stone, the, at the time, real-life husband of Dee Wallace. Karen's friends and co-workers, Chris and Terry, played by Dennis Dugan and Belinda Belaski, do some investigating at Eddie's apartment. A lovely building that may or may not be owned by someone by the name of Bates.
It's number 27 down the hall.
Or Zelda Rubinstein? Well, the interior design certainly fits the bill of a serial killer's living space. To be honest, the most offensive bit of decor here is that lamp. Meanwhile, it's time for Karen to go back to work, since the nation wants to hear from the woman who is Eddie's bane. Problem is, Karen wasn't as ready to appear in front of a camera as she was hoping, so she finally gets some psychiatric help from Dr. Wagner, who recommends that she and Bill spend some time at a place of his called The Colony. On the bright side, they have the late John Carradine here, and everyone else seems to be friendly enough, maybe a little too friendly. This includes Marcia, played by the late Elizabeth Brooks, but specifically with Bill. The festivities are cheery for the most part until...
The only way, I gotta end it, I gotta burn!
It's fine though, because the doc talks him down. That night, Karen is disturbed by some unknown howling. Welcome to the backwoods! You hope that's a wolf. Not to worry though, Slim Pickens is here to handle the supposed coyote problem that Karen phoned in. Terry and Chris pay the morgue that Eddie's body is being housed in a visit. However,
he was here this morning.
Speaking of dead bodies, Karen and Donna, played by Margie Impert, come across a cow that's been killed by something other than a coyote. That means that the men have to go wolf hunting, and leading the way is TC here, played by Don McLeod. If all else fails, trust the one wearing fur, I guess. At the same time, Karen takes part in a group therapy session. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, she can't remember much about her encounter with Eddie. Chris and Terry's research of Eddie, and what he might have been involved in, lead them to a bookstore owned by the late Dick Miller, who I feel would be a great example of how I would be if I owned a bookstore. He gives the two some insight into werewolves, or shapeshifters, if you will. You can disregard full moon influence, but silver bullets are the only way they can be killed. At the colony, there hasn't been a wolf sighting, but Bill has managed to kill a rabbit, which TC sends him to Marcia to cook for him. She does a little bit more than skin his rabbit. That same night, Bill is attacked by a wolf. While Bill gets patched up, Karen states that she wants to go home, but Dr. Wagner talks her out of it. So she calls Chris and Terry to ask them to come to the colony. Chris stays behind to take care of some business, while Terry drives up there. Karen tells Terry of her theory about Marcia trying to get with Bill, and she's not wrong. It's Miss Steal Your Man! Turn him into a werewolf, and lure him out into the woods to have sex with him. It's interesting to know that werewolves do not, in fact, do it doggy style. I can't even claim that I didn't write these jokes. The next day, through a drawing that she and Chris found in Eddie's apartment, Terry realizes that Eddie had spent time at the colony. Not only that, but she comes across a cabin that just so happens to have belonged to Eddie. At least that's what it looks like, judging by the particular sense of decor. Unfortunately for Terry, it seems that someone is home. On the bright side, Terry's smart enough to arm herself. Well, I think that's enough evidence to say that something fucked is going down in the colony. After Karen wakes up, she discovers that Bill has cheated on her. and naturally things don't go well. Meanwhile, Terry has snuck into Dr. Wagner's office while on the phone with Chris to let him know what she's found. To confirm her suspicions, she finds a file on Eddie. This will be the last bit of info she can give to Chris, though.
It's Eddie.
Obviously, Karen's day can get worse when she discovers her friend's body, and Eddie. Karen, this will be a good time to run. Karen? Suit yourself. At least she knows enough to blind him. Karen tries to leave, but is stopped, and is brought to meet the rest of the colony residents. Yeah, everybody's in on this shit, including Dr. Wagner, and their own werewolves. Their plan is to have Karen. Now there's two potential meanings behind this. Chris finally arrives and searches for Terry, only to come face to face with Eddie. Most of him. However, Eddie is unaware of the fact that Chris loaded up on silver bullets before he came here. With Eddie taken care of, it's time for Chris to face the rest of the colony, who in fact plan to kill Karen. With Karen's help, they manage to lock all of the werewolves in the barn and set it on fire. Well, almost all of the werewolves. Chris and Karen are attacked while attempting to escape, and in the process, Karen is bitten. By Bill, no less. Back in the city, Karen returns to the news station. Her plan is to alert people on air about the werewolves, and as she says, she has proof. Also part of the plan is Chris shooting and killing her with a silver bullet. Unfortunately, it seems like Karen's efforts don't do much to convince a majority of the general public. And here's one last twist. And with one of the rarest burgers ever being cooked before us, the credits roll. The plot of The Howling sets it apart from a number of other werewolf movies. Instead of perhaps playing into the monster movie element of the story, it treats the subject matter very seriously. This isn't to say there aren't moments of humor, but to make the obvious comparison that we've all heard and made before, John Landis layered horror and comedy together quite nicely in An American Werewolf in London. Joe Dante's handling of the humor elements here is more tongue-in-cheek and subdued, which works better with the horror of it. There's a certain level of mystery involved here too. Who is Eddie Quist? Why was he after Karen? What's so horrifying that Karen can't remember what happened in the adult store? The whole movie functions under the pretense of being a thriller. It's presenting itself as a crime-oriented thing. There are quite a few moving parts involved here, and it meshes together very well to tell a cohesive story. If you've never seen The Howling before, then it's likely that throughout the film, you'll reconsider what you think the answers are, and what's going to happen. Dee Wallace brought a very interesting element of innocence to her role as Karen White. She was the protagonist that we were all rooting for, and hoped would make it out of this situation alive. She also conveyed a lot of different emotions throughout the movie that set the tone for her character's mental state very well. Robert Picardo is another person that I enjoyed in this movie. I know that a number of people are used to seeing him in roles now, where he's more of the comedic relief. I found him to be a believable, creepy sort of guy, who then reveals himself to be far more dangerous than we or the characters originally thought. I will also say that there are times, especially in horror, where an actor can disappear under heavy makeup and prosthetics, and not know how to act through that. Mr. Picardo did quite well with all of the effects. I do have to say that the atmosphere is quite lovely to look at. Everything is saturated with a variety of colors, without being overbearing. It pays homage to classic werewolf movies with its settings, and such, while also creating a new environment. The special effects work done by Robert Bottin pay off tremendously, the key bit of it being showcased in Eddie's transformation. Perhaps it doesn't hold up quite as well now, in my opinion, as An American Werewolf in London, but it still deserves every bit of praise it's received over the years. The score composed by Pino Donaggio, who has provided the score for a number of different other horror movies. His work on The Howling is really quite suspenseful. It's unique and enjoyable to listen to on its own, as it paints a distinct mental picture. With all that being said, I'm giving The Howling 7.5 out of 10 bloody thumbs up. This is a film that has garnered a lot of admiration, and I can easily see why. I think I enjoyed it and appreciated it more after I watched it again in full. I would recommend this movie to werewolf fans, thriller and suspense enthusiasts, those who prefer their horror movies to be taken a little bit more seriously, and anyone who would like to see what happens when Joe Dante decides to be really scary. See you later.